Ola Akisanya in Aberdeen. How prevalent is racism in Scotland today?
Well, racism is always going to be a prevalent issue, I feel, especially in the United Kingdom and Scotland. Definitely, it's always going to be prevalent. It's going to be evident within society. I think the only thing that changes is the forms in which it shows itself, and the ways that people choose to enact it and the ways that people can carry it out. But racism is still very prevalent. It's I think for different people as well, they're going to feel different ways about it and how much it affects their lives. But we can never say that it's eradicated with the way things are going right now.
Ola, you said it's always going to be prevalent. That doesn't sound very hopeful.
I mean, it's not really... The one thing that I feel that we can't really change as a whole is to get every single person on this planet to think the same way. The one thing that we can do, though, is we can change the things that we accept and the things that are allowed to be carried out in order to prevent these things from happening. I mean, you can change the mindset of the 99%, but there is nothing in this world that's 100%. So in order to eradicate it completely, I think that would be idealistic and not in tune with what is realistic and what we can actually achieve. What I think we should really be tackling is how racism is being used to affect our lives at this point.
Well, we'll come back to that. Afia Hagan in London, you say racism in Scotland now is worse than it was when you were growing up here. Are we going backwards?
Mm-hmm. We are going backwards, and that's not just particular to Scotland, that is also particular to London, where I am. And I think that's because of the rise of right-wing politics, which is actually something that's affected lots of parts of Europe and, of course, the United States. You know, a Tory government here in England and a Trump government in America meant that people were emboldened and people felt that they could say whatever it is they want to say, you know, whatever controversial views they had, and whether that was on social media and whether that was in person. You know, people that were holding the views of othering people, that people, you know, that were different from them, you know, were the ones that should be othered. They made it legitimate for other people to do the same thing. And that's why I think we're more polarized than we've ever been. That's why I think we've gone backwards. I would have thought in 2020, because of what happened to George Floyd and the resurgence of a movement that was already 7 years strong, should have been a turning point and should have been a point where the world over people said, you know, enough is enough. Racial justice is something that we need absolutely and something that should be worked on. But in fact, I think we've gone backwards. In fact, I think we're more polarized than ever. You know, if I say something about racism like I'm doing right now, or I've done earlier on this week, the amount of abuse that I will get in my inbox on social media because I will dare to say that racism is worse than it's ever been, will be worse than it's ever been. I'm
going to come back to you on the whole social media thing, but Zamard Zahid, you were a teacher for 22 years. Is this being tackled in our education system?
I think it would be naive to say that we're tackling it in our education system in Scotland. I'm not going to pretend that, you know, we're anywhere near tackling racism in the education system, but there is progress in certain areas. What we have seen is that there is more representation than there was 20 years ago, for example. However, we've not gone far enough. We have more Black and Asian minority teachers within schools, but there are barriers to them getting promotion. So we have no Black and Asian minority teachers in senior management, and we don't have a Black and minority ethnic head teacher. So what is happening, the structural barriers, that means that the teachers that are in schools, they are facing racism on a daily basis. And the pupils within schools, they're facing racism as well. So they do not want to go into the teaching profession not all of them, or, you know, that it's a very white profession. The curriculum is still very white. And so it's not, these kind of things need to change.
This is something that Amar Anwar talks about very eloquently, about the legal system and the justice system in Scotland.
Absolutely.
Ola, is that something you see as well, that there are barriers, there's, you know, for want of a better phrase, a glass ceiling?
Definitely. That is very prevalent, and there are stats and figures in every organisation's hiring process which will definitely corroborate that. I've worked very closely with University of Aberdeen, and even myself, who would say that they have done a lot of work to try and, you know, tackle racism throughout their entire organisation. Even there, black and minorities are getting hired into higher management positions at a rate of around 30% compared to those of their white counterparts. And there's a great imbalance into the contribution that is being given by those members of staff and those members of society in all organisations, and to the level of the promotions they're getting, the ability for themselves to be promoted. And that will obviously always trickle down, because representation, what we're being seen now is that we can get a seat at the table, we don't get anything to eat while we're there, and we don't get to say anything. So the representation seems to be meaningless when it comes to actuality and when it comes to enacting our actual plans, because all we're getting is a little sentence that we get to say here without any investment behind it, without any belief behind it, and without any backing.
Afia, you and I both know this is the case in journalism, it's the case in broadcasting as well. You just have to look around our newsrooms. But what can we do about it? What can be done to sort this problem then? To break down these barriers?
And that's a really good question. Yeah, and like Ola talked about, it's about, you know, you can get a seat at the table, but once you're at the table, you don't get anything to eat or drink, and you can't say anything. It's not about equality, it's about equity. It's about taking away the barriers that each person has to make sure that they all get a fair chance in life, and they all get the opportunity to progress in the way that they should. Like Zamard said in her article for Hollywood magazine, she said there's no point in having this polite attitude when it comes to racism anymore. And I couldn't agree with that more. We need to take direct action, and that needs to be around racial justice and true equity. And unless people can really understand what those concepts mean and how we put them in place, and like I said, that's taking away or looking at the barriers a person has that affects their chances in life. Unless we do that, we're never going to get to a place of true equality. And I don't think we'll ever get 100% equality. I don't think that will ever happen. But we can certainly do the work to improve the way that things are now.
In Scotland, Zamard, we like to think that we're all Jock Tamson's bairns. There is that equality, but it's clearly not the case, is it?
I think what it is there is sometimes a bit of complacency when it comes to Scotland, because on one hand we see communities coming together, for example in Kenmure Street and with Nicholson Square in Glasgow and Edinburgh, where they stopped an immigration raid, and we want to believe that we're a very welcoming and inviting society. But the reality is, on the other side, we have a black man who was killed in police custody. That's happening at the moment, where he was on the floor in 43 seconds, Sheku Bayoh, and he was restrained by... So we have a system just now where the spotlight is on the police and the justice system. There are no criminal charges there, and there is an inquiry. But there is a public inquiry, yes.
But one thing his sister, Sheku Bayoh's sister, said is that she thinks Scotland's now a racist country. Do you agree?
I have to say, when Caddy Johnson said that I don't feel safe in this country and I don't feel safe for my nieces and nephews, every black and Asian mother, she just reiterated exactly how we feel. Now, I have a young adult son, and when he's out in the evening with his friends in a car, as a mother, I'm worried. I am worried because although I know he's doing nothing wrong, just the colour of his skin is going to attract attention from the police or from, anybody, he could be the brunt of any kind of racism. The same goes for my daughter, my 16-year-old daughter. Can I honestly say you know, with confidence that my daughter in school is not going to be up against racism. She's already had 3 incidents and, you know, and she's 16 years old. And I know that she's going to face those barriers all along the way.
Ola, is that the experience of you sitting in Aberdeen there? Are you getting the same sort of feelings?
I think it's the experience for black and minorities all over Scotland. I think for us to try and imply that these are individual experiences would be very, very wrong. I don't think I can name a black or minority person that I've met in Scotland that has been here for more than 2 years and not experienced racism on more than one occasion. And I would really love for somebody else to find someone who hasn't. Scotland it's such a big issue. We can't deny it at all.
So how do we tackle it?
We have a really serious issue with racism, and we have even a more. I just feel we have a more serious issue with admitting the fact that we have racial issues within this country.
Well, we're doing that right now, and just very quickly, I'm going to go around you all very, very quickly. A quick idea of how you could solve this. Ola first.
What we need to do first is we need to have autonomous rule over the initiatives that we're going to implement to tackle racism. There is only so much where everything that we need to do to help solve the problems that have been implemented into our own societies. There's only so long that we can take asking for somebody else to approve how we can solve those
Very
when
briefly,
we're already
Afia.
meant to be on the tables to solve those problems.
Sorry to cut you off, Ola, we're short for time. Very briefly, Afia.
To be honest, racism isn't the problem of black and brown people, it's the problem of white people. So you're asking the wrong people how we solve racism.
Zamard.
And I'd like to see leaders held accountable for the decisions they make for white people and black people when it comes to racism. You know, it isn't just, you know, we've got to remember that the decisions that are made by mostly white, male, middle, upper class people who are very disengaged with black and Asian communities, and we need meaningful engagement, and that's just not talking, that's actually taking action and being held accountable for it.
And we have only scratched the surface on it tonight, but we will come back to this. Thank you all for joining us in Scotland Tonight.